meet all of you who I don't know. I think I know lots of you, and I'll introduce myself in a second. While we're waiting for people to jump on, if you guys would jump in the chat and let us know where you are in the world and what your role is. Are you an agent on a team owner, an ISA, an ops boss, or whatever you are? Let us know where in the world you are and what your role is. And while you're doing that, I'm going to have Brooke drop some links in the chat while we're waiting for people to get into the room and let you know about our upcoming calendar. Next week, we have an awesome class for anyone who is leading operations people. So you may be an agent leading an admin or a team owner leading multiple operations people. You may be a director of operations leading other operations people. And that is March 20th on our leadership track. We have Coach Them Up or Coach Them Out, how to be a better leader. April 9th, our next Coffee with Christy will be with Scott Schumann of the Sue Adler Group, giving us his top tips for hosting buyer and seller seminars. So that's going to be awesome. April 17th and 18th, virtually, we will have 10 Secrets of a Mega EA. And we are doing, we've never done this before, but we're at that class. If an admin enrolls, you are able to enroll your team leader, team owner for free. So if that's something you're interested in, join us for that. May 2nd, 22nd, we have Systems Are Sexy, and July 18th, we are rolling out Ops Boss Academy, which is a 10-week operations program. And then, of course, we have ongoing group coaching. We have our leader retreat coming up in October. And if you are interested in one of our classes that we take on the road, just reach out to me personally, and I'm happy to chat with you about that. So now that we've done all that, I am super excited to welcome you to Coffee with Christy and Crew. I'm Christy Belt Grossman. I'm the CEO and owner and founder of Ops Boss Coaching. If you have not been with us before for Coffee with Christy is something that we started a couple of years ago that started out as a conversation with our coaches. And the coaches would just get together once a month, and we would get together and pick a topic and mastermind. And we thought, well, instead of just keeping all this great information to ourselves, why don't we just open this to anyone who wants to join us, and we can all mastermind together. So this is not a class. This is actually just Anna and I are going to sit and chat and have some coffee. So our topic today is lead prospecting, follow-up, and conversion. And I want to introduce you to my friend Anna. And for those of you who don't know Anna, I'm going to let her introduce herself. But Anna is what I call a pioneer in inside sales. And I met Anna when I was teaching in Greenville, South Carolina. Gosh, Anna, I think maybe 6 or 8 years ago. We've been friends since, and I didn't even know what an ISA was at the time because most teams did not have ISAs at that time. So Anna, let me have you introduce yourself, and then we're going to jump into our conversation.
Yeah. And I want to say real quick too, and I met Christy because of going to one of her classes, and then I'll introduce myself. But I went to her class, which was operations focused, and I'm in sales. And I just went and I entered the class thinking, I'll get what I can out of this, because I'm not in operations, so this won't all apply to me. It was one of my favorite classes. And Christy, I still have my notebook, and I refer to it. I have a little tray over here with different books from different classes. So I just want to say, if you've ever thought about taking one of her classes, it really impacted me. So that I just felt like saying
Thank you
that.
for that.
But yeah, my name's Anna Krueger, and I used to be a high school teacher, and I always said I would never do sales or business. That's just not me. I'm a teacher, never, business and sales is not my personality. And then through a different series of events, I ended up in a sales role at a college, university, and quickly realized I actually really enjoyed sales because I view sales as I'm helping people. And so I can only ever sell something I really, really believe in, right? And at that time, I was selling college enrollments. Now, of course, I work in real estate sales. But I just found that if I do a good job of educating people and advising them and strategizing with them, I will have sales, and I actually really enjoy it. So I still view it a lot like teaching. I'm just now teaching real estate to buyers and sellers. And also now I coach buyer listing and inside sales agents in the sales process. So I really enjoy it. And I've been coaching now since 2015, and it's been something that has been really meaningful to me for a long time.
I love that approach, the educational approach. And I know we have a lot of operations people on the call today, as well as salespeople. And I want you to know we approach things a little bit differently here at Ops Boss Coaching. So if you're a salesperson who's here, welcome to the dark side. And so I love that because I hear that a lot from people that don't want to be salesy, and it really is an educational process. So I've gathered a bunch of questions from our community on all these topics, and we could spend 2 days, and I'll have you give us information on your classes a little bit later, but I want to dive into the topic today. So let's start with talking about prospecting. So the first question that kind of comes up is, who should we be prospecting? Like, what does prospecting even mean, and who should we be prospecting in today's market?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And this is where I actually, as a salesperson, look to the operations team to help me figure that out. And it's because it does depend on your market. You know, some people here, I saw someone from Alaska, I saw someone from Maine, people from DC. Those are really, really different markets. And to say what would work for one person might not work for a different person. So what I have found the best thing to do is look at what is your history for closings, not appointments set, not appointments held. And this is where someone in the operations team can really support us in figuring that out. But where has my business come from over the last 12 months? And let me make sure I'm not getting away from that. So what I see a lot, Christy, is people hire someone new, or they're just, the market, I got to try something different. And they go off and they pioneer these new things. And that can be appropriate, as long as we don't also forget to call who has worked for us in the past. So the first thing I would say is look at what are your top 5 sources of closings in the past 6 to 12 months, and make sure you're working those before you start adding in new sources. And then if you are looking to add in new sources, I'm a big fan of this book. You can't tell, right? Because it's in perfect condition.
Weird.
But the lead generation model in this book has a lot of different suggestions and ideas of who you can call and where to go. So I would recommend look at your history and then look at the book and see what resonates with you.
And if you're a newer agent or a newer team or a smaller team that doesn't have a big history, go talk to the top producing agents in your market. And I think what you'll find is, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we see is 80% of your business will come from 3 to 5 sources. And people tend to focus on, oh, well, what are those new shiny objects I can go chase versus the things that are going to give you the 80%.
Yeah. In fact, I was coaching a rainmaker. I don't know, this is maybe 5 years ago, but it stuck out with me because I learned a big lesson in coaching her. But we did her business review at the end of the year. We identified her top 5 lead sources, and we're now a few months into the new year. And she could not set an appointment to save her life. And I was bewildered. Like, this is somebody whose team sells over 100 homes every year. It was very weird that she just wasn't setting an appointment. And so I asked her, like, who are you calling? And she said, expireds. And I said, okay, well, who else are you calling? And she said, no, I'm just calling expireds. And we had a big aha moment on that call, because it was fine to start calling that new source, but it shouldn't be all we're calling. And she was neglecting what we discovered on her business review of her closing sources for the last year. So as soon as we said, okay, call expireds, but make them a small portion of your day, get back to the 5 sources that have worked for you, she started seeing traction again. And that really left an impression on me. And hopefully that helps somebody here as you're thinking about.
That's awesome. We see that as well. Love that. Okay, so let's talk about another question I get around prospecting is, like, I'm not into scripts. I don't want to role play. I don't have anybody to role play with. It's not really that important. I just need to get in there and do it. What would you think about that?
Yeah, I would, I guess it would be, how direct can I be on this call?
Very direct. This is Ops Boss. We're very bossy here.
Yeah. I mean, what comes to my mind is then you're choosing to not be consistently successful. You know, some people have the personality that you can be successful just off your personality. But what I think of is that phrase, you're losing so slowly that you think you're winning. And at first, when I heard that, I was like, what does that mean? the way I interpret that now is I might be having enough success that I think I'm being successful. And so that could look like, okay, maybe I'm setting 4 appointments a week, not realizing if I actually had a system that was consistent and I had the same type of verbiage on my calls on a regular basis, maybe I could have 8 appointments a week. But the 4 I'm having is fooling me into thinking, oh, I'm doing a good job. And I don't need to do anything else. And I'm not realizing that I actually could be doing so much more. So for me, Christy, as a high school teacher who said I would never do sales, that's just not me. Um, what I learned new in sales is pretty much everybody has a dialogue that they rely. When I was a high school teacher, I had lesson plans, and literally in lesson plans, they tell you what to say. You could say that that's a script, you know? If the pastor at my church, he has a dialogue that he plans to follow, he has an outline. It's a responsible thing in your profession to have a guideline of what you're going to do and what you're going to say. And for me, what I learned is I felt very fake and inauthentic until I mastered it. So it's kind of like if I just got a new dialogue to learn, you know, I'm going uphill, I feel so fake, I just don't feel natural, this doesn't sound like me. And then as soon as it was internalized and I could do it without looking at the dialogues, I felt like myself. And so I think a lot of people who are adverse to practicing and having dialogues and whatnot, I always just want to say, if you would just commit to practicing, you know, 20 minutes a day for the next 3 weeks, just pick one thing to practice 20 minutes a day for the next 3 weeks, you will pretty well have mastered that. That's a lot of hours in 3 weeks. And you will give yourself the gift of realizing, oh, I do sound like myself. I just had to get over the hump of internalizing it. So I have a
Love
lot of
that.
thoughts about it, but those would be the main ones.
So it's a way to be intentional about
Yeah,
what you're doing. And it's not, I look at it as being intentional, not about myself. I'm not focused on myself because we tend to focus on ourselves and our discomfort and all of that. We want to be intentional because, like you said at the very beginning of this call, we're here to help people. And if we
yeah,
truly want to help people, we need to be intentional about the best way to help them, not to get what we need, but for them to get what they need. And
yeah.
scripts allow us to do that. I remember one time our team was in coaching with Tony DeCello, and we were
Mm,
having a conversation with Gary Keller, and Gary said to our team, "You're successful in spite of what you're doing, not because of what you're doing." And I think that was the same thing as you were saying earlier. Like you were
yeah,
setting 4 appointments, but you could be setting 8. So,
yeah,
okay, so let's go into scripts. And if I want to, I'm just not doing what I want to do. What's a script that I could use today, right away, with my prospecting, or a script maybe I haven't been in touch with all those
yeah.
past clients, all the people that I should be calling? What's a script that I could use?
Yeah. So I'll give you an opener, because when you have a quality opener, that's really the key to launching the rest of the conversation. So I'm going to give you 5 elements of a good call opener. I encourage you to write these down. I'm always a teacher, guys. I can't stop.
I love it.
But the first 2 elements you're going to think, obviously, that's okay. So the first 2 elements are your name and their name. That's kind of obvious, right? The third element is huge. And what you're going to do is say, hey, thank you so much for taking my call today. Or however you would one word that. I appreciate your taking my call. Thanks for taking my call. But we're going to express gratitude. And it's a big rapport builder. The other thing is it causes people to want to stay on the phone with us versus just, oh, click. You know, I just expressed gratitude that they took my call. They're going to be more likely to just want to stay on the line. So the third element that's really important is, thanks for taking my call. The fourth element of a call opener is I'm calling because. And if you're on this call and you've done any sort of prospecting calls, a very common question is, who are you? Where are you calling from? And so we're staying ahead of that by this step. So, I'm calling you because you were on our website last night. Or if I'm calling a really old lead, I might say, hey, I'm calling you because a long time ago you expressed interest in moving. And I love the verbiage expressed interest in moving because it doesn't make them a buyer or a seller. I don't have to read all the history notes when most people don't even pick up the phone anyway. It's just, hey, a long time ago, you expressed interest in moving. And then the fifth element would be an open-ended question about their motivation. And when I say motivation, I want to be super clear. I don't mean their timeline. Some people think motivation is timeline. No, motivation is why do they want to move? So I'll give you an example real quick to tie it all together. So that might sound like, hey, Christy, this is Anna calling from the Haro Group, Keller Williams. Hey, thank you so much for taking my call today. And I'm calling because you were on our website last night. So curious, what has you thinking about moving? That's really exciting. And that initial question should prompt her then to tell me why she's considering moving. And then there's the older lead, the only tweak would be, hey, thank you so much for taking my call. A long time ago, you expressed interest in moving. I wanted to check in. What had you thinking about moving back then? And some of them won't remember, some of them will. But that's much better than what a lot of people do is they'll say, how can I help you? Or do you have any questions? And those are both like conversation killers. The conversation is just gonna die. You want it to be open-ended.
Love that. Love that. If you guys have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as we're going along, or we actually have a nice intimate group today. So if you want to come on camera, we're okay with that too. Okay, so let's talk about today's market. We're in a different situation, right, than we were a few years ago when leads were coming out of our ears.
Yeah.
So have things changed in terms of speed to lead, how fast we need to respond, how frequently we follow up, how are we texting, are we calling, what method are we using? What are you seeing now? Because you coach people all around the country.
Yeah. The biggest thing I'm seeing is actually not a change in the frequency, but I will tell you what is a good frequency to reach out to people with if people are looking for a system. But before I do that, I'll say the biggest thing that I've seen is the amount of contacts it takes to set an appointment. That has changed. So, in a normal market, it would usually be 20 contacts to set an appointment, 20 people picking up the phone. If you are really good with your dialogues, average is 1 out of 10. If you were average and didn't practice all the time, 1 out of 20 would probably get you an appointment set. And what we're finding right now is it's closer to 1 out of 30. 1 out of 30. So it's really all about efficiency and getting really good at asking those motivation questions, because that will help. Like the better you are on the phone, the less people you will need to talk to set an appointment, right? So the biggest thing we're seeing is 1 out of 30 to set an appointment versus 1 out of 10 to 20. The cadence to call people hasn't really changed, but what I find is a lot of people aren't doing what we've recommended for years. So I do want to put that out there. So the Harvard Business Review did a study on this, and they actually did it in 2012. Now, if you're thinking like me, that was a long time ago. Isn't it different now? So we reached out to find out, has this changed? And they said, we actually started to do the study and realized nothing had changed. So we stopped the second study, because even though times have changed and texting and all that stuff, people still generally have the same behaviors. So what they found in this study was if you call someone 6 times in 6 days, you have a 90% chance of making contact. And overwhelmingly, most people I talk to, if I say audit your system, how many of your new leads did you call 6 times in 6 days? It is, I would say less than 5% is, and that might even be being generous, would say that I actually call my leads 6 times in 6 days. And that could be an annoying thing if you're not leaving voicemails. But what we find is if you're leaving a good voicemail, it turns you into a professional, and you want to have a good voicemail that you're leaving. If you're not leaving voicemails and you call someone 6 times in 6 days, that's where you dip into the feels telemarketing like. But if you're leaving a professional voicemail because you are a professional, that usually gets a much better result. And usually by that 6th day, 90% of people have picked up or called you back.
So operations people who are on this call, as I'm listening to Anna talk, my brain is just stirring with all the backup that you can be providing to your agents and your ISAs. Are your scripts documented? Are your systems documented? On many teams, if you don't have an ISA, have you defined who owns who is the director of lead gen? who is the director of sales on your team? And it may be your rainmaker is wearing that hat, or it may be you as director of operations are wearing that hat. And that means inspecting what you expect. So like Anna says, who is tracking whether those calls are actually being made, who is, coaching the agents on how they can get their conversion up higher. So sorry, my ops brain steps in with all of that.
No, never
What other
apologize for
questions do
that.
you guys have around lead follow-up, speed to lead? What about texting versus emailing versus calling and all of that?
Tips on what to leave in a message. So, I will do my best to answer that succinctly. And in the class, we spend about an hour on what 5 voicemails should sound like. So it's the thing is, if I ask people, and I'm curious to know in this audience, how many of you have had a training on how to leave a voicemail? Overwhelmingly, people say no. I've never had a training on how to leave a voicemail. So a lot of people think voicemails don't work. And when you actually know how to leave a voicemail, they absolutely work. So I'll give you the key elements and just know there's more to this, but I'll do the best I can. The main element is it needs to be 30 seconds or less. The second element here is you want to give them a value add of some sort. So for example, if I'm calling Christy and Christy's a seller, maybe I just sold a home 2 times faster than our area's days on market. So maybe the days on market in my area is 70 and I just sold her home in 32 days. A voicemail could be, hey, Christy, this is Anna calling from the Haro Group. Want to let you know we just sold a home 2 times faster than the average home in the area. I would love to save you time in selling your home. Call me back today by 5. And then I'll leave my number. So it's less than 30 seconds. The value add is I can save you time. Call me back so I can do that. And then the third main element is give a specific time. So call me by 5. A lot of people say, call me when you get a chance or call me when you get a moment. And if I'm calling a friend, I don't think about this stuff when I'm calling my friends. But if I'm calling someone at work, I know that if they have a deadline, that's going to give them much higher likelihood that they'll call me back at all. So Christy, it was funny. I was shadowing a new agent one day and I told her these tips. And in my mind, I would tell people to call me by the end of the day, but she chose 11 a.m. I thought that was weird, but I didn't correct her because I'm like, it's not wrong. It's just different, but it's not wrong. I was with her and people started calling her back and apologizing that they did not call her by 11. It was like 12 o'clock. And they were like, I'm so sorry. I just now got your voicemail. And I was like, okay, it works. So the time, giving them a specific time is actually a crucial element to that voicemail.
I love that. It creates some urgency also, because if
Yeah.
they're calling you back, it's likely that they're interested in what you said and want what you offered. So therefore, when you create urgency and scarcity, they're going to call back. I love that.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah. And the last voicemail actually gets the most callbacks. So I'll give that one because that one is different than the first 4. So the first 4 follow the general guideline I just gave you. That last one sounds kind of like this. And I always try to make sure I'm smiling so I don't sound like I'm accusing, because the words could sound accusing if you're not friendly in your tone. So that it would sound like, hey, Christy, it's Anna from the Haro Group. I've left you a lot of messages this week, and I don't know if you're just busy or not interested. Would you just let me know either way? I really, really do not want to pester you, but I also want to be available to help you if you want help. So just call me and let me know what's going on. Here's my number. That message gets a ton of callbacks. And I think it's because we're just being a normal human. I used to leave that because it's what I actually was thinking. It wasn't some script. I just thought it, and I realized it worked well, and I've turned it into a script. But that one gets a lot of callbacks. So I joke, I wish we could on voicemail 1 say, I'm about to leave you a lot of voicemails, but that'd be kind of weird. But usually that 5th voicemail will get a callback if you haven't already gotten one.
As I'm listening to you say that and hearing how real that you actually sound, it's just another reminder of why that script and role play is so important, because lots of times we think about being uncomfortable with the words, but we don't think about the tone, and the tone we deliver in is as important, or maybe more important, than the words.
Yeah. And actually, Can I say two things about that, Christy? I
Absolutely.
we have a lot to cover. The first thing I want to say is for scripting, like, and I'm not assuming any of you are thinking this, but I have heard it before and I'm just going to mention it. But I've had people when I'm doing something like this, they're like, oh, but you just sound so natural. And sometimes that frustrates me because it makes it sound like, oh, it's just so easy for you. And what I wish people knew is I almost got kicked off of my first sales team. My first few months on my sales team, I almost got let go for underperformance. And I just decided, like, okay, I've got to learn, like, I either need to get out of the industry altogether or I need to figure this out. But like, this isn't working for me anymore. And that's what sent me on a journey to learn all these language patterns. And then I would listen to them in the car. I would practice them in the mirror at home. I would call my mom and practice on her. And my first 6 months in sales, I decided I'm going to pretend I'm in college. And this is going to be my one focus as much as I can outside of family and things like that. And I know once I get this down, then I can go into maintenance mode. And so people that might be hearing this thinking it sounds so easy or natural, I want you to know I almost was fired from my first sales team, and it took a lot of intentionality to sound that way. And then the second thing I want to say, Christy, when you were talking about tone of voice, I had a client recently who, when we role played, she sounded great. And her opener that I just taught everyone was on point. And she was like, everyone's hanging up on me and I can't figure out why. And as her coach, I also thought, I don't know what to do because she sounds perfect. I don't understand why people are hanging up on her. This isn't making sense. So we agreed that she would record the first few seconds of every call for a week and then listen back and see if we could figure it out. Because I honestly was perplexed. As we listened, her opener, instead of going, hey, Christy, this is Anna, calling from the Haro Group, Keller Williams. She was going, hey, Christy, this is Anna, calling from the Haro Group, Keller Williams. And her whole call opener, her voice was going up, which when your voice goes up, people think that you're not confident or you don't know what you're talking about. So by our next call, I didn't even have to coach her. She said, oh, I figured it out. I already fixed it. And now people are talking to me. So your point of tone of voice is huge. You've got to practice tonality as well as the words.
Well, and I think for many people, role playing is great. It's like my husband coaches baseball. It's like there's players that are awesome in the batting cage during practice, but put them in a game situation and they strike out because you're not, you change your physical, you change all the things. So I think we see that in real estate or in any kind of sales thing where you're great in script and role play, but maybe you're actually changing your tone of voice. Maybe you're not saying the words you think you're saying. So operations people or sales people, record yourself and listen back. Ops people, ask your salespeople if they'd like support with recording so they can listen to themselves back and see what they can tweak. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about lead conversion. Tips to build trust and tips to uncover objections.
Yeah, that's a really big one. So the biggest way that I have found to build trust, and this isn't just my idea, this is proven. But they call it keyword backtracking, and you may have heard of this if you've taken some of our classes. But there's something where when you use their exact word back to them, it creates a lot of trust and rapport. They may not even know why. So what I like to do, Christy, if I'm talking to a lead and say we just got on the phone and I'm asking them about why they want to move, I'd actually love to, at this kind of last minute, but I'd love to actually role play real quick and just show you what it would sound like. So Christy, if we could just pretend you're a buyer or a seller, and I'm going to ask you about your motivation, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing, and it goes a long way to build rapport. Is that good?
Sounds good.
All right. So Christy, moving is so much work. What has you thinking about moving?
We're actually not moving, but we're thinking about buying an investment property.
Okay, awesome. And what's important to you about buying an investment property?
Oh my gosh, it has to be in like the best school district ever because we just had a new grandson and we're probably going to rent it out to our kids.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, congratulations on the new grandson.
Thanks.
So you want to buy an investment property, potentially rent it out to it sounds like to your daughter.
Yep.
Okay. What is important to you about buying an investment property for your daughter to rent? You know, a lot of people wouldn't do that. So what makes you want to do that?
I just am really concerned about where they live and I want to make sure that they're in a really great area.
Okay. And what does a really great area look like to you? So like if you were to describe what a really great area is, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, I would love for them to be in the Flint Hills School District. They
Okay.
have great teachers there and a great park down the street. It's just a really, and also it's close to where we live.
Okay. Got it. I'm tracking with you. Okay. And then I would keep talking if Christy was actually a lead, but I'll stop there because I know we have other things to cover. But Christy, what I have here on the screen is what I would actually do with a client. Even to this day, if I have a buyer or a seller, I'm whipping out a piece of paper and doing this. And what I'm doing is whatever your answer is off my first question, I'm going to write it down. You said investment property. And the arrow signifies a question. So I know from looking at this, I've asked you 3 questions because I have 3 arrows. And whatever you say, I'm writing down your exact words. I'm not paraphrasing. So, you know, if you say downsize, I'm going to write down downsize, not smaller house. And what's going to happen is as I keep doing this and I ask you questions, I'm using your words. And it's kind of like this subconscious thing of rapport and trust is starting to be built. I've had people before say, I don't know what it is about you, but I feel like talking to you. I don't usually like talking to realtors. And what I know is, yeah, because I'm actually listening to you. I'm actually writing down what they're saying. I'm using their words. Um, we actually had an investor call us. And if you do lead gen calls, we all know investors can be a little bit more challenging to work with. And I love investors. I want to be an investor. But they're not as emotional about it. It's a lot more businessy, right? And this guy called and he said, I want to buy over 250 homes in Greenville, South Carolina. I live in California and it's cheaper there. So I'd rather buy there than in California. So I'm on the phone thinking, do not mess up this phone call. Like 250 homes, this could set up my next 5 years, right? And I almost didn't do this because I felt intimidated. And I thought, nope, I'm just going to follow the system because he's just a person and this is what I learned works. I'm just going to do it. And you know, at the end of that, he said, I don't know what it is about you. I don't like realtors. I don't ever meet with a realtor, but I will meet with you. I'll meet with you. That guy, I'm not even on the team anymore. And last I checked, he was still buying homes with the team that I used to work for. And I don't know that that would have happened without the rapport that came from this.
I
So
love that because when you repeat the words back to me, I am being on, since I was being the buyer, I immediately feel like, oh, you get me. And
yeah,
I've probably talked to multiple other realtors who made it all about them, not about me. And now I feel like you care about me. That just built trust with me.
yeah. And I'm so glad you said that, Christy. And it goes back to my true heart as a salesperson or a sales trainer is truly, in fact, if I would say to write this down, this is at the top of all of my training material when I teach a new class. My job is to listen to their story and then strategize and educate to help them get what they want. So my job is really, I'm their coach, really. Like the job of a coach is to help people get where they want to go. So my job, yes, I might be a real estate agent or a salesperson, but really actually what my job is coaching. I'm a buyer and a listing coach. And my job is to hear their story, hear their goal, and then figure out a way to make it come true. Just like a business coach or just like a sports coach. And so that's where this really comes in. And what I find, Christy, with this is one, I usually get their motivation. And especially in today's market, people are more hesitant to move. And if their motivation has been reiterated, it can get them into action because they're reminding themselves, they're not just telling me, they're reminding themselves of why they want to move, which can get them to actually make a decision.
Yeah, because you get into action because of your heart, not because of your head.
Right.
Right. And so I think oftentimes the home buying process, it starts with the heart about why I want to move, what's important to me about moving. And then it becomes like this process of looking at listings and like doing all the things, and that moves into your head. So when you reiterate why you're moving, it goes back to your heart, and that's what compels the action.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And the thing is, we've all made decisions that maybe haven't made the most financial sense, but it was because we wanted to, right? And let's be honest, if someone bought a house at a 2.5% interest rate, if you look at the financials, it might not make sense to buy a house right now at a higher interest rate. But if they have a personal goal that is big enough and important enough to them, they will. But I think what happens, I'm getting really passionate, but a lot of times we hear, oh, I want to wait, or I'm nervous about interest rate. And a common response is, okay, I'll call you later. And I look at it like, what if this is someone who needs to take care of an aging parent? Or what if this is someone who really needs to get their kids into a better school district or a safer area? We're doing them a disservice to not take a moment and just say, yeah, well, whenever you're ready to move, what's the reason you want to move in the first place? Even if it's not going to be for a while. And what I often find is as people out loud say their motivation, they turn into maybe I'll do that sooner, because they just put it out loud why they want to do it. So
And then now you have the opportunity to make that possible. And I want to say we have other people on the call today besides real estate. We have TC companies, and we actually coach operations people in all different industries. So I'm sitting here as you say that, seeing one of our TC company owners thinking, if you're a TC company owner talking to an agent about using your services, what would they be doing with their time? Why are they, maybe they have an aging
yes,
parent that they could spend their last moments with if you were handling their transactions, for example.
yes,
So it applies across industries.
it does. In fact, when I learned this, it was when I was a college recruiter. So I teach it now in real estate, but yeah, any business represented on this call right now, when you are talking with someone about potentially working with your business, this is the magic right here.
Is there a certain number of arrows you have a goal to get 3 arrows, or?
Yeah, the magic is 3 or more. Most people, the real like emotional type reason comes out at 3. And in fact, you know what's funny? This, Christy and I did not discuss this, right? We did not discuss this beforehand. This was totally spontaneous. But as I look at the 3rd, that's when you started saying, I want them to live closer to me. And you got into that side of it. And guess what? It happened to be on the 3rd question. So it's usually that 3rd question where it comes out. And so systems oriented, I love ops because you are systems oriented and I feel safe when I'm around you. That's the system, is there needs to be 3 arrows, and we don't stop until we have 3. You can have more, but you can't have less.
Right. So ops people capture that in your life of a lead as you're documenting. Monica makes a great point. Those notes can be key in long-term follow-up too. So maybe you
Yes.
don't get the appointment, you don't get and you're following up 6 times, whatever. So we didn't hit that. We hit how many times? 6 calls in 6 days when it's a new lead. What about nurturing leads?
Yeah. So actually, Monica, that's a great point about it needs to be in the notes. The whole reason we get motivation is to talk about it over and over and over in all of our follow-ups. And so it's pointless if you're not going to document it. So those of you that are more on the operations side, I would encourage making sure that there's a system that all notes motivation must be in the system. Especially if you're on a team, because as it gets handed over, the transaction coordinator, I know some call clients and some don't, depending on the roles and whatnot. But how cool would it be to call and say, hey, guess what? This just happened. You're one step closer to having your grandson live really close to you. That's so exciting. Versus, hey, we need some paperwork, right? Hey, let's get this paperwork so we can get your grandson closer to you. That's a very different conversation.
I
So
love that. And I actually might create a custom field in my CRM that's called motivation so that you can do that, because that would make a customer experience versus customer service. Love that. Great
yeah.
tip.
Yeah, it means so much to them when they feel like everyone on the team knows them. For those, I'm imagining a lot of people here are on a team because you have ops, right? You don't have ops if you're not a team at some point, regardless if you're 2 people or 10 people. And where a lot of people fail is it's the handoff, right? So in the 90s, the US, we had a team in the Olympics that was winning a relay race. And we dropped the baton in a handoff and we lost the Olympics because of that. But we had been number 1. until that handoff happened. And I thought, what an analogy for what we do in teams. If I'm an agent handing off to an ops, or the ops is handing off back to me, or an ISA handing off to an agent, if we're not clearly communicating motivation and what the story is with that client, we're going to lose. And or if we don't totally lose, we're going to have a bumpy ride, right? It's not going to go so well. So it's got to be in the notes. And then to your question about what does follow-up look like, there isn't actually a set system for what follow-up looks like, because it depends on the conversation. So if I talk to a buyer and they say that they're 6 months out, here's the somewhat system for that is whatever they say, cut it in half, because they want to be moved by 6 months. So I should be calling them in 3, if not sooner. You know, sellers, usually you want to call 2/3 out. If you want to make it easy, just call everybody in half the time that they tell you.
I'd say call everybody in half, because how many of you, I'm guessing you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you have called back and followed up with the lead only to find out they already moved, right? They often move sooner than they think they're going to move.
Yeah, that's a pretty terrible feeling.
Yeah. What about uncovering objections? Let's talk about maybe the top objections for buyers and the top objections for sellers that people are hearing, and how are you handling those?
So there is actually a system for that, and it's very similar to this. So I would like to do an experiment real quick. If everybody on this call could use the chat box. If I said, I want to wait until interest rates come down, tell me in the chat box why you think that would be. And the more people we have participating, the better quality we'll have here. So if I say I want to wait till interest rates come down, what is your automatic assumption of why I'm saying that? And let's see what comes in real quick. Feel like we need some Jeopardy music.
Yeah, do.
Yeah, so they have a low interest rate right now. They already have a low rate. Can they afford payments? They're indifferent. Rates might fall. Less house with higher payment. So there's 33 people on this call. That is 6 different reasons. Some of them dance around each other a little bit, but there are 6 different things that people have said. And that's actually a very specific objection, is interest rates. Other objections are things like, oh, I want to wait till spring. When I do this in a class and say, why do you think someone might want to wait till spring? I'll get 20 different answers in the chat box, right? There are so many different reasons. And so what we got to do is very similar to what I did with this motivation. So at the top, it would be interest rates coming down. And then I would say, ask a question, what's important to you about interest rates coming down? In my experience, most of the time, they're usually wondering just, can I afford it? That's a big question. Some people can't stand the thought of spending more money on interest, so that could be a different reason, but I can't actually address it until I uncover it. So that would be the first thing, is whatever they tell you out of the gate, check your assumptions and say, okay, what's important to you about that? Or tell me what concerns you about that, or just tell me more about that. And as you dig, you'll be able to isolate their very specific reason. So if it's an interest rate objection, to be honest with you, the biggest thing that's going to overcome that right now is their personal motivation. You know, financially speaking, for a lot of people, unless they're a renter, the interest rate objection, I get it. I really do. But that doesn't override personal motivation. And so sometimes people think, well, if I just wait a year or two, maybe they'll come down. They're actually not predicting that currently. That could change. That's not actually what they're predicting. And a question you can ask people is, how long are you willing to wait to achieve your grandson living close to you to wait for rates? And it's going to really come down to what their motivation is. That's going to be a big factor on that one. But, you know, Christy, sometimes people say, I want to wait till the fall. And my assumption goes to maybe they're worried about election, or maybe they're worried about interest rates or whatever. And there was somebody I talked to, and he said, oh, well, that's just when my lease is up. Well, I know there's some things you can do to help people with their lease. You know, there's different you got to find the terms of their lease. And so that's why the question asking is important. If they tell you an objection and you have a one-line response, you may be aiming at the wrong thing. I'm not big into those one-line responses for objections. You got to ask first, and then you can deal with it.
I love that. Yeah. And so my operations brain is going to, you guys, these are all great conversations to have at your team meetings. People are often looking for content for their team meeting. What topics should we talk about? Asking questions is a great topic because what I hear salespeople do is immediately going into the script for interest rates when there really isn't one script because you don't know what the true objection is. You just heard the first layer of what the objection is. So that's awesome. Okay, what are some signs or indicators that your prospect is ready to convert?
Yeah, so it actually could sound backwards, but if they are giving you objections, that actually can be a sign that they're trying to work it out. People who just say, oh, I'm not interested, that tends to be someone who's truly just not interested. But if they're giving objections or bringing up concerns, that actually is a big sign that they could be interested, because what they're basically asking for is educate me. Something that I tell the salespeople I coach to write down and like stamp it on their forehead is most objections are a lack of education. So it's usually a misunderstanding about the market or a misunderstanding about how, agency works or things like that. So objections actually can be a buying sign. The other thing that I would say is there's a series of 4 questions you can ask that will quickly sniff out who's interested and who's not. And I'll give them to you kind of rapid fire. But this is what I started using as a filter because I realized even with all the questions, sometimes I'm still assuming they're more interested than they actually are. Or I'm assuming, oh, they're not going to do anything, and they actually went with someone else. So the 4 questions that I find really helpful are, once you dig the motivation up like this, I might say, hey, Christy, on a scale of 0 to 10, how motivated are you to get your grandson close to you and into this better school district and all that? Scale 0 to 10. The second question is, what makes it that number? The third question is, what would need to happen for it to be a 10? Now, some people say, oh, I'm a 10 plus already. So the third question would be, what would need to happen for you to stay a 10? So 0 to 10, how motivated are you? What makes it that number? What would need to happen for you to be a 10? And then the fourth question is kind of a confirming question. So Christy, if I'm hearing you right, if I did X, Y, Z, you would be a 10? Awesome. And the questions from that, I mean, I'm telling you, that is a game changer, because when I say what's making you a 7, they're basically now going to tell me their motivation and objections. Well, I really want my grandson to be close to me, but I'm concerned about interest rates, and I'm not sure if we can find a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch in this area. Oh, well, that was beautiful. I just got exactly what I need to do to help this person, right? And then what would need to happen for you to be a 10? They kind of reiterate themselves a lot of times as, well, I need a 3-2 that's a ranch, and I need to make sure I can afford it. Okay, anything else to be a 10? Okay, great. So Christy, I find that usually those 4 questions really help me know, is this person ready or not? And from a system standpoint, Haro is my old rainmaker. He would drive me nuts, but he would say, I'm not going on any appointments you set for me if this whole sheet's not filled out. And that forced me to make sure I asked those questions. And if I missed one question on the sheet, if there was one blank, he would give it back to me and say, oh, I'm not going on this appointment. He wasn't doing that to be mean. He was doing that to train me. And his point was, if they're not staying on the phone with you long enough to fill this whole thing out, that's a red flag. I'm not going to be as prepared if you're not filling this out. And if we don't have these 0 to 10 questions, that's a flag, right? And so that's what I would recommend.
So operations people, what is your system? Do you have jot forms around that? Do you have spreadsheets around that? Lots of different ways. I see Buffy Kirkman on here. I know she already has 27 ways that she's doing this. But what is your system? And what is your system that makes it easy? Because we're not all ISAs sitting at a desk, right? We might be agents on the road or agents coming in to do lead gen every morning. What is the system that makes it easiest for agents? Before I have more questions for you, and we're going to get into some ISA questions. I know that you have a mega lead conversion coaching that started recently, but it's not too late to get in if I'm not mistaken. Will you tell us about that?
Yeah. So if you've heard things today that you feel would be helpful and help the team earn more money, we do have a class that has all of this in there. So everything I've taught you today has been snippets from the class. So I've been coaching this since 2015. In 2020, I sat down and revamped it and thought, what are all of the things that a buyer, listing, or inside sales agent would need to know to be crazy successful? And we made a list. I gave it to other people I considered top performers and they added to the list. And then we turned that into an 18-week program over the course of 6 months. We go over dialogues like we have today. We give you systems. So we give you 4 tracking systems. We talk about the economic model, which is basically how do I make sure I make the money I want, even though I'm on commission? How do I make sure that I'm going to make that money? And we go over all of that. So the class is called Mega Lead Conversion. You can go to megaleadconversion.com. And right now on Mega Lead Conversion, it's talking about our May 1st class, which is coming up May 1st, of course. But I have the link for the current one I'll throw in the chat box. That link I just put in is for the class that started in February, and you can still enroll. And when you enroll, there's already 5 sessions on demand. So if you have someone right now and you're like, oh gosh, we need to get this training.
So it's not too late. Yeah, you don't have to wait 2 more months. Okay.
Yeah, there's 5
It looks
sessions.
like we had to have a couple of attendees saying it's a 10 out of a 10.
Oh yeah.
Love it. Yay.
Awesome. Yay.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So you guys enroll in that because obviously we cannot cover it all in a 60-minute call.
Right.
I know we have some ISAs and I get that we talked a little bit about the numbers, how many calls to get an appointment, how many follow-ups until a lead schedules an appointment. So 6 calls in 6 days for a new lead. And then I think you gave us, you're seeing 1 in 30, about
Roughly
30 calls to schedule 1 appointment. And then what about, do you have any numbers on the back end for nurturing? How many follow-ups and over what period of time?
Yeah, so usually it takes about 7 to 13 follow-up calls to have the lead turn into an appointment. So my whole thing is the better you are with your dialogues, the better chance you have of them converting on the very first call. But for the ones that don't, that's okay. Most of our job is follow-up. I compare it to football. We wouldn't expect a touchdown on the first play all the time, right? We know in the game of football, it's going to take multiple attempts to get it down into the end zone. That's very much like the game of real estate. It takes a lot of attempts. So usually when you call people within 7 to 13 calls, they'll convert into an appointment, as long as there's someone who actually has some level of interest. And it could be less if your dialogues are better. That's what I would say.
And are those numbers real estate numbers or across industry numbers?
Yeah, they're specific to real estate. Thinking
I would
back,
guess they're not that different. I was going to ask you about the Harvard Business Review study. Was that a real estate study or across businesses?
no, that was across businesses.
That's what I thought.
And they don't have follow-up numbers on there, but I am thinking back to when I was a college recruiter, very similar job activity, just a different industry. So still sales, still phone calls. And I would say it was probably about the same, 7 to 13
I'm guessing
calls.
it's very similar too.
Yeah, I doubt it would.
We have 5 minutes left, so I want to hit 2 more questions.
Okay.
ISAs, people always ask, what's the compensation? What do you recommend? Has that changed from what we were hearing 5-ish years ago?
Yeah. So real quick to define ISA, because a lot of people are like, what is that? What do those letters mean? Inside sales agent, and it means the person whose full-time job is lead generation and lead conversion. So they're not out working with clients directly. They're on the phone until they're ready for the appointment, and then they hand them over. Does that make sense the way I explained it? Okay.
Yep.
Typical pay, and this is the best way to pay. We don't have time to talk through all the different options, but this right here is what will help you keep an inside sales agent long-term, is have them be licensed, because when they are licensed, they can earn commission. And that gives them an unlimited earning opportunity. So the best way to pay an ISA is a base pay. And it's going to depend where you live. You know, Christy, you're in DC. You're going to need to pay a higher base than I would need to pay here in South Carolina. But you want it to be enough that it's not enough to pay all the bills and they need closings to make it happen, right? So probably somewhere in the $24,000 to $30,000 range base pay. And then 5 to 10% commission when a home closes. So that is the best way. And it's because you're motivating them towards closings. Sometimes I hear teams pay per appointment set, and I've coached it. I've seen it where somebody's desperate to feed their kids and they just set appointments just because I get money every time I set one. I don't care if it's good or not. And we're not actually getting closings. So it's the best way to pay is to motivate for a closing.
Okay, totally agree with that. Last question, and you guys feel free to chime in your questions. We have a couple minutes left if you have other questions. For the operations people who are on the call, if you are an agent or you are an ISA, what are a couple of things that you wish we would do for you to make you more successful so that we all succeed together?
Oh man, that is such a good question. I wish that, and the person who did this on our team did a good job, making sure we track. If I can be vulnerable with you, I just surveyed a class of about 70 people. I don't know if everybody responded, but not one person said they're consistent about tracking. And that is so scary to me because tracking is how we make sure we know what does it take to bring in a closing. So if nobody on the team knows what it takes to bring in a closing, it's like driving with your eyes closed. That is scary business. So the number one thing I would say that would be really helpful from an ops standpoint is having a system in place to make sure that we're tracking. Our ops, she would joke, "You're not going to lunch till you turn in your numbers." And she kind of made it funny, but it really, we had to turn in our numbers to leave. So that helped so much in giving me peace of knowing what do I need to do every day to bring in business. The second thing I would say is help, and which ops person does this, I'm not sure. I guess that's where
We'll figure it out.
Okay, yeah. But auditing the system. So helping me be aware in sales, it's a lot of responsiveness. Like, oh, I was going to do this and then a call came in and oh, that turned into an appointment and I've got this paperwork. And I can accidentally not call my leads 6 times in 6 days, even though my heart wants to, because I'm just distracted. So I think helping me be aware of what am I actually doing with the leads that came in, give me a report or just talk to me about it. You know, you had 20 leads come in the last week and only 40% of them have been called the 6 times in the 6 days. I need to know that kind of stuff. And I think the other thing is be encouraging. I think for me in the role of sales, I viewed it as my job is to help keep our ops here. Because I understand if I am not bringing in sales, our ops team is not going to be around. We're not going to be able to pay them. And so a big part of my motivation, and honestly, it felt like a huge responsibility and like a healthy weight, was part of my job is to keep these people in place. Like I want to keep Christy on the team. I love Christy. I want to keep her here. And I think hearing from ops about, like, it sounds funny to say, but like appreciating what we're doing on the front end. In sales, you might have people cuss you out, hang up on you, just disappear. It can be very discouraging. And having encouragement from ops can be helpful. That said, we also need to be encouraging you. It needs to go both ways. But that is something that would really be awesome from ops.
Love that. That was a great finish to that. And I know there's questions around tracking and what system you use and what are you tracking and all of that. So we may have to schedule another follow-up call. Shannon makes a great point. As an agent, it needs to be easy, right? Yeah. I hear a lot of ops people, remember that the people using these systems, we should be building the system for the user of the system, which in this case is not us. This is the agent or the ISA who's using the system. So we need to have their input on how we can simplify. And if we were going to simplify our tracking, what are if I'm not tracking, my agents are struggling, what do I want to track? Bare minimum to start with before I level up.
The bare minimum would be how many contacts every day and then closings, because I can at least figure out how many contacts does it take for me to get a closing. Better, still not crazy, but better would be contacts, appointments set, appointments held, signed, closed, those 5 metrics. And I want to say, I know we're at time, this will probably be my last comment. when I do find agents tracking, I'll say, great, what's your conversion? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't ever look at it. It's in some big system and it's so complex. I just turn my numbers in every day. I don't know. Well, then I'm like, why? So your ops might know, or your rainmaker might know, but I have a business within the business. I need to know my numbers because that still means even if my ops or rainmaker knows, I'm still operating a business totally blind within this bigger business. So a lot of the agents need to know where to find their numbers and how to interpret the percentages. And I find a lot of people in the coaching program, I just give them a tracker that's super simple and they add it. They do 2 trackings because they're like, I don't get my system from the team. So I'll still do that, but I want a simple tracker. Yeah.
So ops people who are on the call, think about how you can support your agents and your ISAs in this. And the way I think about it is I do it, we do it, you do it, in
Yes.
terms of, here, I'm going to show you how the numbers are in the CRM or in the tracker. Now let's do it together. Now let's meet once a week and you do it and you present to me, because now you own it and you know your numbers. So it may be that your agents are coaching with your team owner, and maybe they're going to meet with you to do pipeline tracking once a week or every other week or something like that, where you can actually get into the nitty gritty with them that maybe the team owner doesn't have time or ability to do. Anna, I want to respect your time. Thank you so much. How can people reach out to
Thank you.
you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah. So my email is anna@sparkingprogress.com. I'll put it in the chat box. So anna@sparkingprogress.com.
And reminder, guys, I don't know if you picked up on this, Anna is also a Strengthsfinder coach. We've had her in to work with our team of coaches, as well as I've referred her to lots of clients. So feel free to reach out to her for Strengthsfinders. I always say it wrong, Strengthsfinders. It's hard to say.
I think
Coaching.
I say Strengthsfinders too. It's fine.
And I forgot to say too, if you guys are not following us on Instagram, please follow us on Instagram at Ops Boss Coaching. If you're interested in finding out our upcoming events, you can just go to opsbosscoaching.com to our events page. We have multiple classes, coaching, retreats, all of the things. And thank you for joining us, and have a bossy week.
Yay. Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate you. And I learned I know today you were asking me questions, but I learned so much from you. So thank you for what you do in the industry.
My pleasure. Have a great week, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.